we wanted to know who among the organizations joining us here have their own data privacy policy already. Um, Maybe you can answer through the chat box if you have your own data privacy policy. And then second question is, have you already appointed a data privacy officer in your organization? And then, is your organization a personal information controller or processor? Meaning, and this would depend on the size of your organization or the size of data that you handle. We wanted to know that so our speaker can also have an idea of the kinds of organizations or participants we have. So the results, 59% of the participants said that they already have they already have a data privacy policy. 11% said they don't have yet, and 30 are not sure if they already have a data privacy policy. Okay. For the next question, the question is whether you have already appointed a data privacy officer. Baka mali ang pag-assign in ko kasi hindi ko nakikita yung polls.
Hi, Miss Doreen.
So, yes.
Yeah. Okay lang po, ano ko po, sabihin ko na lang po yung total. Apa.
Yeah. For the second question, 40% said they already have a data privacy officer. So good luck to the DPO. 40% said they have not yet appointed. And 20 are not sure if they already have a DPO. So for the last question, if they are a PIP or a PIC, I'll just wait for the result. Baka yung iba not sure kasi hindi nga nila alam what a PIP or PIC mean. Okay, yeah, do have the result na kasi I'm not seeing it from my screen.
Ano po sa question number 3, is your organization a registered personal information controller? 7% po ang sumagot ng yes, 22% po ang sumagot ng no, and then 71% po, mostly large po talaga ang sumagot na not sure po.
Okay, so this is probably catching the attention of our speaker now, and I would like to introduce her to you now. Our speaker is a lawyer assigned at the Policy Review Division of the National Privacy Commission, where she's actively involved in formulating policies, rendering advisory opinions, assessing data sharing agreements, and reviewing legislative documents. She is likewise the policy advisor for the non-bank financial institutions, collaborating with various local and national companies on the safe conduct of their business in connection with data privacy. She is one of the Philippines representatives in the Council of Europe, an international organization which seeks to protect human rights through the passage of various treaties involving data protection, comprising of all the 47 member states of the European Union, the European Economic Area, and the European Free Trade Area. As the delegate of the Council of Europe, our speaker is at the forefront of the latest innovations concerning data protection. Her knowledge in the implementation of sound privacy management programs started when she served as an operational risk officer for the Philippine office of Malaysia's leading bank, Maybank Philippines, while concurrently being the head of its fleet financing unit. Since joining the National Privacy Commission, she has served as resource seeker for various private and government entities, including DOLE, DTI, and the IACAT, or Interagency Council Against Trafficking. Our speaker is a communication arts graduate, cum laude, from UST, where she also earned her Bachelor of Law degree. As a lawyer, she has worked in the Bureau of Customs, was corporate lawyer of the 10th largest bank in the world, more formerly known as the Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi UFJ Limited, and was partner at the BDT Law Offices. She recently completed her Certified Information Privacy Practitioner program in Europe. Friends in the NGOs and other participants, please welcome Attorney Anna Benjieline Puzon.
So let me just share my screen. Miss Doreen, I'll just start to share my screen po. Thank you. Okay, does everybody see my screen?
Yes, po.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's see. Okay, so I'm here to discuss the Data Privacy Act of 2012. But before I start discussing a lot of things, I just have a question for all of you. What do you think is the world's most valuable resource? Anybody? Anybody po?
Information.
Information. Who said that po? Was that Miss Inday?
Joey po.
Miss Joey. Okay, thank you, Miss Joey. Yes, correct. Information. Okay. If you're still not convinced that it is the most valuable resource, you will see here random facts about the world of data. So if you'll see, there are 50 million tweets per day that is being exchanged around the world. Then we spend around 700 billion minutes on Facebook each month or more pa kapag Filipinos. Okay? And then we send about around 2.9 million emails every second. Imagine that, 2.9 million emails every second. And this was before the pandemic. So all the more that data is being processed, especially in the World Wide Web, now that we are on cloud, now that we are working from home during this time of pandemic. So the exchange in information is really very rapid and exponential. This is why there are a lot of enterprising companies who use this information for their benefit. Example of this are companies like Facebook, Uber or Grab here in the Philippines, Airbnb and Alibaba, or we have Shopee, Lazada, Beauty Manila. So these are enterprises that use information. Example, si Alibaba, si Shopee, si Lazada, they don't have their own products. They don't have their own inventory. What they have is information of sellers and information of those who would want to buy products. And then they just have that in their platform and they enable these two parties to share information so that they will be able to sell and one will be able to buy products. Ganon din si Facebook. They don't have content editors. They don't have writers. What they have is a platform for the exchange of information between content providers and between those people who would want to access this content. Right? Ganon din with Airbnb or Booking.com or Agoda. What they have is information about those who are willing to provide accommodations and information about those who are looking for accommodations, and they put it all together in one platform so that they could interact there. Same goes with Uber and Grab. So those are exchanges of information that we have in our day-to-day lives. Okay? This is also the reason why some enterprising individuals use this information for their own good. Remember Cambridge Analytica? Has anyone heard of that? Information
Yes.
that are available in Facebook were used by politicians in the US to be able to decipher the voting habits of the US citizens there. So, because if most of you would know, every like, every page that you check in Facebook, sometimes this is being monitored and this is being reported and this is being sold. So, every like that you do in Facebook, lahat ng mga binivisit nyo na pages in Facebook, these forms as part of an algorithm that they can use. That's why sometimes, I don't know if you've encountered it, sometimes when you're using Facebook, and then you just mention to your friend that you want to go to Boracay, all of a sudden your feed will be flooded by hotels about Boracay. Have you encountered that? Has anyone encountered that po? Or halimbawa, parang nakipag-usap pa lang, parang gusto kong bumili ng bagong MacBook. And then all of a sudden, you're flooded with advertisements about MacBook. Have you encountered that? Anyone? Wala po. It happens. O kaya pag may
Many
like,
times
Yes,
po.
many times, yes. Opo. Or sometimes you just like one thing and then all of a sudden you're flooded by related things about that particular thing that you like, right? So that's one way of them using information. Okay? This is the reason why here in the Philippines, our Congress enacted Republic Act number 10173, or an act protecting individual personal information and information and communication systems in the government and the private sector, creating for this purpose a National Privacy Commission and for other purposes, or otherwise known as the Data Privacy Act. Okay, so this was enacted in 2012. Okay. The principal author is no other than the late Senator Edgardo Angara, who said that Data Privacy Act makes it mandatory for all data collectors, whether public or private, to protect the security, integrity, and confidentiality of all the personal information they collect. By doing this, we help usher in a truly knowledge-driven economy. Okay? So you see, it says here, the Data Privacy Act helps in protecting, securing the integrity and confidentiality of personal information. Okay? Because when that is protected, when that is not being abused, then you truly usher in a knowledge-driven economy. As my example a while ago, so we have a lot of retailers already online. But if the information of buyers will not be protected, then it will not be possible for us to use online platforms to be able to sell or to buy. And that will not be able to help the economy. So there is really a need for us, like NPC, to regulate the use of personal information so that it will not be abused and so that it will be used for beneficial purposes. Okay, so far we're good po?
Yes, attorney.
Okay. So the law is anchored with Section 11, Article 2 of the 1987 Constitution, which states that the state values the dignity of every human person and guarantees full respect for human rights. Okay. Later on, I will discuss the connection between human rights and the right to privacy and data protection. Lahat po yan ay magkakonnect. Okay? So this also pertains to the right to be let alone, which is the most comprehensive of rights. valued by civilized men. Okay? Now, this also stems from the fact of informational privacy. We have this concept of informational privacy where the individual has the right to control the collection and access to their personal information, which may be accessed by either the government or the private sector. Kasi syempre po, that's your personal information. So you have the right, you have the say on whether or not such personal information that you have may be used. Okay? Now, as to the scope, so the Data Privacy Act covers all types of personal information. Okay? And it also applies to any natural or juridical persons involved in processing in the Philippines. So if you're a foundation or you're a cooperative, or let's say you are processing personal information of employees, then you are a personal information controller and you are subjected to the Data Privacy Act. Okay? But remember, the law pertains only to personal information. So let's say personal information may pertain to an individual. Okay? It has something to do with an individual in a way that you can be known or you can be ascertained. Okay? If it's not personal information, let's say somebody is asking for the name of one of your partners. Let's say si Cooperative Development Authority went to FSSI and asked, sino ba yung mga partners ninyo or sino ba yung mga beneficiaries ninyo? You cannot say, may DPA. We cannot tell you that because there's the Data Privacy Act. That's the connotation of most people. But no, that's not correct. Since the Cooperative Development Authority is asking for information about a corporation or a juridical entity, there is no personal information involved. So, pwede kayong mag-disclose. Okay? So far, you're getting it? So, personal information has something to do with ascertaining a certain individual. Okay? Halimbawa po, your first name, your address, your cell phone number, your passport number, those are information that pertains to you as an individual. Yun po ang covered ng Data Privacy Act. Okay? So far, we're good?
Yes, attorney.
Okay. Now, you should also remember that it is the policy of the state to protect the fundamental human right of privacy of communication while ensuring free flow of information to promote innovation and growth. Okay? So while there is a right to privacy, there is also a concurrent duty to ensure free flow of information. So not because you say there's a Data Privacy Act, it means that everything should be private already. There should be a balancing of interest. Okay? So example, if let's say a government entity is asking for information about a certain individual, so you should balance the interest. Will it be for the good of the general public or not? So you balance it. So the National Privacy Commission does not prohibit the processing of information, but rather we regulate. Not because there's a Data Privacy Act, it does not mean that you are not allowed to disclose personal information already. There are different legitimate purposes for which you are allowed to disclose personal information. Hindi ibig sabihin, bawal na agad. So later on, we'll discuss that. Okay? So far, medyo nalilinawan na po ba with the DPA? I'll discuss it more later. Okay? So for now, let's go with discussing about the people or the entities involved or covered by the Data Privacy Act. Or sorry, rather, what types of information is covered by the Data Privacy Act. Okay? So we have two types of information. First is personal information, which I was discussing a while ago. We'll discuss it now more in detail. And then second, we have sensitive personal information. And then third, we have privileged information. Okay? We'll go into that one by one. Okay? So the Data Privacy Act covers first personal information or any information, whether recorded in a material form or not, from which the identity of an individual is apparent or can be reasonably or directly ascertained. Or when put together with other information, would directly and certainly identify an individual. So example, just random information. Anyone here from Quezon City? Can you just use the raise hand button? Anyone from Quezon City? I do not see a raise of hand. Let's say, example, Miss Anna is from Quezon City and she works at FSSI as an accountant. So Anna, Quezon City, FSSI, accountant. These are different information, but when you put it together, will point out to a particular individual. Diba po? So those are covered by the Data Privacy Act. Okay? Now, for personal information, processing is generally allowed, but it should be in accordance to Section 12. Later on, makikita nyo po ang Section 12. So again, pag personal information po, processing is generally allowed in accordance to Section 12. Now, for the second type of information, we have sensitive personal information. Okay, so these are information pertaining to race, ethnic origin, marital status, age, color, religion, philosophical or political affiliations. It may also pertain to health, education, genetic or sexual life of a person, or to any proceeding for an offense. Okay? These are like court proceedings. Or those information issued by government agencies peculiar to one individual. Example of that is your SSS number, your passport number, your tax identification number, because these are peculiar to you as an individual and was issued by the government. Okay? There are also sensitive personal information that are classified by law to be as such. Okay? Now, with this kind of information, processing is prohibited except if it is allowed under Section 13. Okay? So, kapag personal information, allowed provided it is in accordance to Section 12. Pag sensitive personal information, it is prohibited to be processed except if it is allowed under Section 13. Malinaw po? That's actually the main gist of the DPA that I want to highlight. Now, for the third type of information, we have the privileged information. So these are communications between husband and wife, lawyer and client, doctor and patient, priest and penitent, and all other information classified under the rules of court to be privileged. Okay? Like example, yung mga proceedings for minor, those are privileged information. So processing is prohibited. Okay? So far, we're good?
We are.
Okay. Am I going too fast or okay lang po?
Okay lang po.
Okay. Okay, so we proceed. I've been talking about processing of personal information. Okay? But what is processing? Okay? Processing is generally any operation that you do with personal information. So it could be collection, recording, organization, when you store it, when you put it in the cloud, when you put it in your database, when you publish it, when you post it, okay, when you update it, when you retrieve it, when you put it in your filing cabinets, those are processing of personal information. Okay, when you encrypt it, when you consolidate it, when you destroy it. Okay, generally it's from creation to storage to use to archiving until such time that you have to dispose of it. Those are processing of personal information. Okay? Now, who are the people involved in the Data Privacy Act? We have three. Okay? First is the personal information controller. Okay? The PICs are the ones that controls the processing of personal data, or they may also instruct another to process personal data. So, FSSI or your partner foundations are on itself personal information controllers because you handle personal information. Because each of you as an entity would have employees or you would have individual beneficiaries. So since you control the processing of those data of your employees or beneficiaries, then you are a personal information controller. So dun po sa poll ninyo, if your organization is a registered PIC, for those who answered that they do not know, your organization is a PIC. Ang ano na lang po, ang problem na lang is whether or not you're registered now or not. But later on, we'll go to that. Okay? Now, aside from the personal information controller, we also have the personal information processor. So if you will see, the PIC or the personal information controller can instruct another to process personal information. Okay? So when they instruct another, that other entity is the personal information processor. So they are the ones to which the PIC may outsource the processing of personal information. Okay? So example, if FSSI is an employer and they have an employee and you outsource the processing of your payroll, example, if there's a third party who processes your payroll, then that entity who processes the payroll of your company is a personal information processor. Or example, if you have a company ID and you outsource the printing of the ID to another company, then that company is a personal information processor. Okay? So far, we're good?
Yes, attorney.
Okay. Now, we go to the data subject. Who are the data subject? Okay? These are the individuals whose personal information, either personal, sensitive, or privileged information, is processed. Okay? So, example, the employees of your different foundations are the data subjects in relation to their employer, or the beneficiaries or those who obtain loans from the cooperatives are the data subjects with regard to or in relation to the cooperatives or the foundations. Okay? Or you as an individual, if you are a borrower of a particular bank, you are a data subject in relation to the bank. Or you are a data subject in relation to your telecommunications provider. Okay? Since it's your personal information that is being processed. Okay? So we move on. We go now to the rights of the data subjects. Okay. So first, you have the right to information. Okay. A while ago, sila Miss Doreen held a poll about who among the participants has a policy, okay, privacy policy already in force. Why do you have that? Okay, why do you think you have that? It's because it is pursuant to a data subject's right to information. Because the privacy policy would include there how personal information is being processed, why it is being processed, what is being processed, how it is being processed. Yun yung contents ng privacy policy. Okay? So the information that must be supplied there is the description of the personal data, the purposes for why it is being processed, and the basis for processing such data, the scope and the method of the processing, and if it is being outsourced, the recipients of such personal data, and then if you have your data protection officer, you also put in there the identity or the contact details of your DPO, so that if ever there are any issues with regard to the processing of the personal information, your data subjects would be able to know who they can call. Okay? You put also there the retention periods for the information that you process. And you also remind them that they have the rights of data subjects. Okay? Now, with regard to rights of data subjects, you also have the right to object. Okay? So a while ago, I told you about informational privacy, right? So individuals have the right to control what government or private institutions collect or use among your personal information. So if you think that your personal information is being used for something that you do not want them to do so, you have the right to object. Okay? However, the right to object will only apply if processing is based on consent, meaning you give them an explicit consent na, okay, you can process my personal information, or if processing is based on legitimate interest. Okay? Later on, I will discuss why. Okay? So for now, it's important to remember that the right to object only applies when there is consent or if the basis for processing is legitimate interest. Okay? Now, data subjects also has the right to access their personal information. So, you as an employee of your company, you have the right to access your files. You can tell your HR, can I ask for a copy of my application form? Or can I ask a copy of my contract? Because that's part of your right as a data subject for you to be furnished those information. Okay? Why? Because there may be times that you have to correct it, or there may be times that you have to update those information. Okay? So that is also part of your right as a data subject, the right to correct or to rectify, and you wouldn't be able to do that if you don't have access to your information. Okay? Yeah. Now, you also have the right to erasure or blocking. So if your personal data is incomplete, outdated, false, or it was not obtained lawfully, or if it is being used for a purpose that was unauthorized, or if it is no longer necessary for the purpose, you have the right to erasure or to blocking. Okay? So far, we're good? Okay. Then last, we have the right, second to the last, we have the right to data portability. Okay? This just means that a personal data subject has the right to obtain an electronic or structured format of your information. Okay? Then last, data subjects has the right to damages. Okay, so if your information was unlawfully obtained or it was processed without your authorization and they fail to block or to erase your information, even if you told them already, then you have the right to file a complaint with the National Privacy Commission and you may be awarded damages for that. Okay? So far, we're good?
We are, attorney. Yes
Okay.
po.
Na-absorb naman?
Yes.
Okay. So we move on. Let's go now to the general data privacy principles. Okay. We have 3. Okay. First, we have transparency, and then we have legitimate purpose and proportionality. Okay. Now, for transparency, this just means that the data subject must be aware of the purpose and extent of processing, the risks involved in the processing of their information, and how it is being safeguarded. And then also having the right to know the identity of the controller. Let's say if it's just not you who is processing the information and you are outsourcing it, a data subject also has the right to know who the PIPs are. Okay? Now, this is also in connection with the data subject's right to information. Okay? So you just have to be transparent in the processing of information because that is pursuant to their right to information. Okay? Now, for the second privacy principle, we have legitimate purpose. Okay? This just means that the processing of information must be compatible with a declared and specified purpose, which must not be contrary to law, morals, or public policy. Okay? So, if you have your privacy policy and you declare there the purpose for which you are processing information, it should not go beyond that purpose. If you say you are collecting personal information in line with your contract as an employer in connection to one employee, then it should only be for that purpose. If let's say you're going to give out the information of your employees to credit card companies, that is already beyond the purpose for which you collected the information. So that is already not allowed by law. Okay? Example also, let's say you got the names of the particular beneficiaries of your cooperative partners for the purpose of giving it out to the Cooperative Development Authority. Okay? You cannot give it to some other entity because your declared purpose was just to give it to the CBA. Okay? So you do not go beyond the purpose for which you collected the information. And then also, legitimate purpose would also mean that you only process personal information in accordance to Section 12 and Section 13 of the law. Okay? Now, next. The third general data privacy principle is proportionality. So this means that the processing of information shall be adequate, relevant, suitable, necessary, and not excessive in relation to a declared and specified purpose. Okay? So, it means you will only collect data that is needed to be collected. You don't collect in excess of the purpose. If your purpose, let's say, if your purpose for collecting information, let's say in your application forms when you have employees, if it's just pursuant to an employee-employer contract, you only collect details pertaining to that. So it could be the general background of the employee, their previous employment, their educational background. So those are the only things that you collect. You cannot ask them for a history of their family or yung family tree nila because that is excessive already. You do not need it. Okay? So that is proportionality. Okay? So processing only if the purpose could not be reasonably fulfilled by other means. Okay. Now, we've been talking about legitimate purpose. Under Section 12 and Section 13 of the Data Privacy Act, consent is the first in both sections. Okay? But what is consent? There is actually a connotation that you can only process personal information if there is consent. Actually, this is wrong. Later on, I will show you there are other bases for the processing of information. Kasi there are a lot of people who would get angry. Wala naman akong consent na binigay sa inyo, ha? Bakit nyo pinaprocess yung information ko? These are the problems that we encounter most of the time. But actually, that is not just one of the basis for the processing of information. But of course, number one nga, because it's under Section 12 and Section 13, number one pa rin si consent. And it is better to have the consent. Okay? For a while lang, ha? I'll just drink a bit. Okay. So what is consent? You always hear that. Well, consent is actually the data subject agreeing to the collection and processing of personal information. So for consent to be lawful, it must be freely given, it must be specific, and it should be an informed indication of the will. Okay? So most of the time, when you go to the internet and you go to different websites, you will see there their privacy policy or maybe your own websites. Okay? And then you will see there, if you agree to this, please tick the button. So you will have to assess, yung consent nyo ba doon, was that freely given? Did you do it on your own? Okay? Also, it should be specific. You consented to a particular processing, granulated siya. It should not be in a general statement. Okay? Because if it's just a general statement and you say yes to it, then it is not actually lawful consent. Okay? Kasi you don't know the underlying purposes that they have in processing your information. And that will not be an informed indication of the will. Okay? So for your consent to be specific, the personal information controller must give you the specific details as to where you are consenting to. Okay? And then such consent must be evidenced by written, electronic, or recorded means. It could be in a form of a signature, or by ticking a box, or sending a confirmation email or oral confirmation. You see that also when you order from fast food chains. Diba? So there is a recorded voice there that says, we process your personal information. If you agree, press 1. Diba? You hear that, right? So that's one example of giving consent. Now, when there is silence or you do not do a positive act, it does not mean consent. If there's only silence or naka-pre-tick yung boxes, it is not you who checked it, then that is not a legitimate consent, okay? Or not a lawful consent. Okay? Okay. Now, consent means giving the data subject genuine choice and control. Okay? So, and it must be unbundled from any other terms and conditions. Kaya nga siya granular. So, for whatever purpose that you have, there should be a corresponding consent. So, usually ang ginagawa nila, they do it paragraph by paragraph. Okay? So, let's say, we process your information for purposes of obtaining a loan with us. Do you consent? Yes or no? We may also process information for us to be able to do credit checking. Do you consent? Yes or no? So it's granulated. You do it per process so that your data subjects would know the different processes that is involved when it comes to their personal information. Okay? Okay. Now we go on. So far, we're good or information overload na po?
So far, so good.
Okay. May I just request if it's possible for the participants to turn on their cameras para medyo may interaction naman? Kasi baka wala na akong kausap in the other line.
Meron.
Oh, now I see faces. Beautiful faces. Okay. So we're good so far, Mga nakasmile pa naman. Okay. So we proceed. I've been talking about Section 12 and Section 13. Okay. So what is Section 12 and Section 13? First, we go with Section 12. So Section 12 pertains to the criteria for lawful processing of personal information. Okay? So as I said a while ago, when it comes to personal information, processing is generally allowed provided it is within Section 12 of the law. So under Section 12, first, we have as criteria for lawful processing or as basis for processing of information, number 1, consent. Okay? But as I've said also a while ago, not because there is no consent, it does not mean that you are not allowed to process information already. Kasi there are other criteria for the lawful processing. So we go now to the second, which is contractual agreement. So if you are processing personal information of your employee, that is in connection with a contract between the employer and the employee. So your employee cannot refuse for their personal information to be processed dahil wala silang consent. Because it can be, the basis could be found under Section 12. The second part of that is contract, pursuant to a contract, or in preparation to a contract. Let's say, if your company is an employer and there is an applicant, baka mamaya sabihin ng applicant mo, wala pa naman tayong contract, hindi pa naman ako employee. But it's in preparation of a contract. So you are allowed to process their personal information already. Okay? Also, even if without consent, You can process personal information if it's in compliance with the legal obligation. Example, if you need to give the names of your employees to DOLE for reportorial purposes, then you have a basis to give their personal information to DOLE because that's in compliance with the legal obligation. Okay? So far, we're good? Also, you can process personal information if it is necessary to protect vitally important interests of the data subject. If their personal information is needed to be given to protect their life and their health. Like yung sa contact tracing ngayon, when you go to restaurants nowadays, or you go inside an establishment, they collect your name and your number, or your email addresses for that matter. So it is because it is necessary to protect the interest of not only you as a data subject, but also others because of the pandemic. Okay? But remember, the collection should be limited only to personal information. Hindi sila pwede mag-collect ng sensitive personal information because that will not be in accordance to Section 12 already. Okay? So, they may be authorized to collect your name, your contact number, your email addresses, because those are personal information. However, if they collect, let's say, health information, like were you admitted in a hospital for other comorbidities, ganun ka-detailed yung ano nila, health declaration form nila. Well, you may choose not to answer that already because that's excessive already. Okay? Now, fifth, personal information may also be processed pursuant to public order and safety. Okay? Or when it is necessary to respond to national emergency. Okay? Or your personal information will also be collected for the fulfillment of a constitutional or statutory mandate. Example, when your barangay official collects your names or the names of those who were recently from abroad for purposes of contact tracing. So that is pursuant to their mandate as a public authority. Okay? Now, seventh, personal information may be processed pursuant to the legitimate interest of a PIC. Okay? Example, if FSSI or your partner institutions has a legitimate interest in collecting the personal information of those who would want to avail of your services, that is within your interest. It may be because you need to comply with your rules and regulations, then that is within the legitimate interest of your company as a PIC. And you are allowed to process personal information. Okay? So far, we're good? Naiintindihan naman po? Okay.
Yes.
Now, we move on. Sa sensitive personal information naman. We said, processing of sensitive personal information is generally prohibited except if it falls under Section 13. So, yung mga health information ninyo, educational information, or yung tax identification number ninyo, SSS number, PhilHealth number, those are sensitive personal information. So generally, others are not allowed to process it except if there is first, consent, or if it is provided for by existing laws and regulations. Example, your employer has the right to collect or to ask for your tax identification numbers for them to be able to report you to BIR because that is provided for under existing BIR rules and regulations. Okay? Also, if it is necessary to protect the life and health of the data subject. So your barangay officials or your local health authorities may collect health information from you in connection to the pandemic. So they may collect sensitive personal information about your health in relation to Section 13. Okay? Also, it could be processed for the lawful and non-commercial objectives of public organizations, or if it is necessary for medical treatment, or if it is necessary for the protection of your right as an individual in court proceedings. Okay? So, let's say details about court proceedings. Let's say somebody filed a case against one of your employees. Let's say somebody used the funds of your organization and you have to file a case against them. So the collection of their sensitive personal information may be allowed because it is pursuant to your right to protect your right as an individual or as an entity in a court proceedings. Okay? Because there is a need for you to exercise or to defend yourself for a legal claim. Okay? So far, we're good? Okay. May I ask participants to turn on their cameras again? Kailangan ko ng audience participation at this juncture. Okay, quiz time. Okay, para alam ko naman na meron nakukuha. Okay, what can you say about this picture? Any volunteer? Applying what we've discussed? Anyone? I'll ask Miss Doreen to call on a participant. Miss Doreen, you want to volunteer anyone?
I'll volunteer an office mate. Okay. Tumango na si Alvin eh. Alvin.
Sir Alvin, what can you say about the picture?
Ma'am, there are sensitive personal informations na hinihingi wherein a person can decline to provide.
Yes. Yes, okay. Why? Bakit kailangan why can they decline?
Ma'am, kasi hindi naman related for, let's say nga, para makautang. Yung information like yung medical records.
Yes, correct. It's not necessary for the purpose for which they are asking for the information. Very good, Sir Alvin. What else? Any other volunteer po? Applying the general data privacy principles.
Sa grade 2 ng hands ni Miss Lorinet.
Yes, ma'am.
PEF.
Apo.
Hi. Good morning. Yeah, yung sa on the principles, yung proportionality. So yung masyadong maraming requirement na hindi naman kailangan for the purpose of pagpapautang. So yun.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you so much, Miss Lorinet. Yes, so it goes against the principle of proportionality also because there are a lot of requirements that is not really necessary for you to obtain alone. Okay. So thank you for that, Miss Lorinet and Sir Alvin. So we move on. Okay, I'll show you a video para medyo ma-absorb nyo naman yung mga na-discuss natin a while ago.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for calling Hot and Fast Pizzas. Can I
I
have
want to order a pizza.
Surely, sir. Can I have your multipurpose identification number?
You can hear it naman po, no?
One sec.
Yes po.
Yes
po.
po. Yes po.
Yeah, it's RSP 0603-1983-MI.
Thank you for the number, sir. Am I speaking with Mr. Rajneesh S. Puri from Baikula, Mumbai?
Yes.
The number from which you're calling is 9191930484 and your residential number is 22223244.
Yes. But how do you know all this?
We are connected to the system, sir. We have all the related information.
Thank you, sir. Good, good. I want to order a regular size seafood pizza.
Sure, sir. But that's not a good idea.
What do you mean?
As per your last medical records at Bombay Hospital, dated 9th August 2015, you have high blood pressure and a high cholesterol level, sir.
What are you saying?
As I said, we are connected to the system, sir.
Oh, shit. Okay. Then what would you recommend?
Try a low-fat super veggie delight Mexican pizza. You will like it.
And how can you say that?
As you borrowed a book titled Popular Mexican Food from National Library last month, which is overdue to be returned, sir.
Okay, I give up. See, I'm very hungry. Send me one of those. How much would it cost?
The total cost is rupees 365, including taxes, sir.
Okay, fine. You send the pizza. I'll pay for it by my credit card, okay?
I'm afraid you have to pay us by cash, sir. Your only active credit card of Apex Bank is over the limit and amount due is rupees 79,765 since July 2015. That's not including the late payment charges on your last cash withdrawal.
That's fine. You send the pizza. Good evening, sir. I guess I will have to go to the ATM in the next lane.
Sorry to inform, but you can't, sir. You have reached your daily cash limits, which was withdrawn at an ATM at Domestic Airport Terminal B when your wife took a flight to New Delhi today.
Damn it. How do you know?
As I said, we are connected.
Yes, you're connected to the system. Just 25 minutes. You send the pizza. Thank you, sir. I'll pay by cash. How long would it take?
25 minutes, sir. But if you can't wait, as you said earlier, that you're very hungry, you can always come to a nearest outlet.
What?
As you're just 4 minutes away from a nearest outlet in your area, and you have a car of number MS01XC3484, your Kazi brand.
Oh, God. How the hell you
As
know?
I said to you earlier, we are connected to the system, sir.
What the? I just want my pizza.
Okay, your order is confirmed, sir. Anything else, sir?
Nothing. Would I be getting that 3 bottles of cola mentioned in your menu?
We normally would, sir. But based on your medical records, you're also a diabetic and...
Enough! Send the cola along, you bitch!
I request you, please do not use such language, sir. You were convicted on 13th March 2015 for using abusive language to a policeman.
What?
And you were also arrested for misbehaving with a lady in a party.
Shut up! Just shut up, you bitch! Hello?
Good evening, sir. Am I speaking with Mr. Rajneesh S. Puri?
Yes.
Sir, we have a complete anger management program which can treat your aggressive behavior.
What? Who told you that?
It's in our system, sir.
To hell with your system! Fuck your system!
There you go. So nakita ninyo, when your information is processed without authority, and if it goes beyond the purpose for which your information is being processed, it goes beyond the purpose for which their information was originally processed. Diba? So that could happen. Wala namang authority to give it out to an anger management program, but the pizza place gave it to the anger management program. Okay? So may third party na involved and he was not informed. Diba? Wala siyang consent and it is not within the legitimate interest of the pizza place to do that. Diba? Okay, so we move on. Okay. So let's go now to the security measures for the protection of personal data. Okay. So as PICs, your organizations should be able to comply with the following. Okay. At the risk of being repetitive, I just have to do this. So the PIC should collect personal information only for specified and legitimate purposes. And you should collect personal information fairly and lawfully. And the processing should be accurate, relevant, and up to date. Okay? And then personal information must be collected adequately and not excessively. And you should only retain personal information for as long as necessary. Okay? Sa Data Privacy Act, wala pong forever. Okay? Hindi lang in love life yung mga walang forever. Pati sa DPA, wala dapat forever. You cannot keep records for future purposes. There should always be a retention period. You just have to determine it within your organization as to how long you're going to keep personal information. Okay? And then, your entity or your company must also implement reasonable organizational, physical, and technical security measures. Yun po yung iisa-isahin natin at this juncture. Okay? So first, organizational security measure. So one way for you to implement organizational security measure is to designate a DPO or a data protection officer or compliance officer. Okay? Some of you said a while ago that you have a DPO already. Correct? Meron naman pong iba na nagsabing hindi nila alam. So if you don't know, maybe there is none because everybody should know who their data protection officer is. Because your data protection officer will be your liaison. Sila po, they will act as the middleman between NPC and the data subjects when it comes to data privacy issues. Okay? Now, you also need to put in place data protection policies. Miss Mia gave me a list of some of your questions and somebody asked about the necessity of having data protection policies. Yes, as a personal information controller, you are mandated by law to put in place data protection policies. So it's up to you on how you will go about it. You will be the one to determine what your organization needs. Okay? Among the things that you need to look into is the amount and extent of the processing that you do when it comes to personal information. Kasi yung ibang organization, konti lang yung employees nila. Yung iba naman, marami. So, there may be organizations that could just appoint a data protection officer. And if there are big organizations na may iba't ibang branch across the country, aside from employing a data protection officer, you might also want to look into appointing a compliance officer to help the DPO. Okay? So you just have to look how much personal information does my organization handle. Okay? Then you might also want to look at the storage of those personal information. Are personal information of your employees only in a filing cabinet? Secure ba yon? Nakalock ba yon? Does anyone have access to it? Kasi dapat may access controls din kayo for files. So, depende sa level ng mga employees who only has access to particular types of files. You might also want to look into classifying the documents, the different documents of your organization. Merong for general consumption, merong highly sensitive documents, or merong for internal use only, and meron yung allowed to be given out to the public, you might look into classifying your documents that way. Para at least your employees will also be guided kung ano yung pwedeng ilabas outside the organization, or if such documents should only be retained within the organization. Okay? And then also, when you classify your documents, you will also be guided on how to store it. Okay? So for documents na pwede naman for public consumption, okay lang na filing cabinet lang. And lahat may access doon sa particular documents na yon. But if it's like sensitive documents already, or those that are for the consumption of particular units only, let's say accounting lang ang may access dapat doon, or HR lang yung may access doon, then you determine only the necessary people who will have access to it. Okay? Now, along with that, there is also a need for you to regularly review and evaluate your privacy policies and practices. Okay? Because not because you have policies in force at this time means that you are already secured. Every now and then you have to test the vulnerability of the policies that you have in place. Because baka mamaya, as you go along and you have new employees on board, they might not be aware of the policies that you have. So you have to review and evaluate and continuously cascade it to your employees. Okay? Now, you can also record the processing activities of your personnel so that you also know sino ba yung may access, how do they have access, and for what reason do they have access. Okay? You control access to different documents and information. Okay? So this is where you can have the HR or the human resources help. Okay? Then you also need to maybe look into your contracts with your outsourcing providers. Okay? Kung nag-outsource kayo ng ibang mga processes niyo, you review your contracts with them and ensure that the provisions of the Data Privacy Act is also incorporated in your contracts with them. Because even if you are outsourcing the processing, hindi lang yung PIPs ang magiging responsible for the personal information. Okay? You are still responsible for whatever the PIPs will do to the personal information because you are controlling them. You are still the one who will decide what they can control. So both of you will be liable in case of any breach. Okay? So far, we're good? May I ask people to turn on their cameras again? Gusto ko lang makita kung ano, okay pa. Okay. Sige. Now, we go on to physical security measures. Okay? For physical security measures, you can consider monitoring and limiting access to activities in the workstation. Example, yung accounting ninyo, is it accessible to a lot of people? Even yung mga outsiders or those that do not belong to your organization? Baka nakikita na nila yung mga documents, mga sensitive documents. So you have to monitor and limit access. Okay, so you have to consider the design of your office space. Even though most of you will be working from home, most probably, when you go back to your offices, you have to look into the design of your workstations para at least yung mga sensitive matters that are being handled by HR or accounting cannot be easily seen by other people. Okay? Then you can look into defining the duties, responsibilities, and schedule of individuals involved in the processing of data. And that pertains again to access control. Okay? You can also have policies on the transfer, removal, or disposal and reuse of electronic media. If let's say your company gives out company-issued laptops, baka yung laptop that was that is being used by a new employee was the laptop of an old employee. So lahat ba ng information from the old employee has been erased already, has been deleted already? Or if you have database, kung may access yung laptops ninyo sa database, okay, we have certain policies in place about access of database. Or if you're working from home, we have policies in place about using the cloud or sending emails within or outside of the company. You have to look into that also. Okay? And then you can also put in place procedures that would prevent mechanical destruction of files. So, dyan importante yung disaster recovery plan ninyo. Especially if your office is located in flood-prone areas. How do you secure your files? Do you upload it in a database? And do you have a backup for those files? Or if something happens, a disaster happens, do you have a backup office so that you can still retrieve the information that you need? So those are the things that you need to know also. And that has to be reflected in your policies. Okay? Your workstation must be also secured against natural disasters and power disturbances. So kapag nagkaroon ng brownout, especially with the nearing elections, marami na namang mga brownouts na mangyayari niyan. So what will happen? If let's say nagkaroon ng brownout, all of a sudden nawala na yung ine-encode ninyo. So you should put in place a policy that would protect such things from happening, na dapat naka-auto-save siya. You try to incorporate that in your system. Okay? Now, for physical security measures, even as simple as keeping things under lock and key is vital. Okay? Hindi yung lahat ng mga documents nasa table lang for everybody to see. Okay? That has something to do with incorporating data privacy as a culture in your organization. Being aware that personal information can be easily accessed and can be easily seen. Okay? Meron nga tayong tinatawag nating visual hacking. Like example, in this platform, I just click on the participants and I know who the participants are. So pwede nyong masilip din kung sino yung mga participants. That's visual hacking already. You know already who are involved here. Okay, let's say mga logbook ng guards in the office and there are cell phone numbers there. Nakita nyo, uy, nag-log in na pala sa guard si Atty. Puzon. Nandun yung cellphone number niya, kunin ko nga para makapag-consult ako. So that's visual hacking already. Okay? So you have to be aware of those things also. Okay? Now, you can also put in place technical security measures. So you put in security policies with regard to processing of personal data, like protecting your computers. Yun nga, having a backup, yung na-auto-save siya dapat. Okay, updating your softwares. Okay, and then you can also regularly monitor for security breaches. So you review all the processes that your organization does, and then you identify the risks. That is actually conducting a privacy impact assessment. So you enumerate all the processes that your organization undertakes. Let's say, yung HR department, ano yung mga processes involved? What are the possible risks involved in that type of process? You list it down and you try to apply already security measures for each of the risks that you identify. Ganon din sa accounting. What are the processes involved sa accounting? So when you identify those processes, you identify the risk also, and you put in place security measures already to address those risks. Okay? Sa iba nyo pang department, kung may marketing department or whatever, So you have each of the different units should identify already their processes and how to identify the risk involved in those processes. Okay? So that is how you regularly monitor for security breaches. Okay? So you also need to have the ability to restore availability and access to personal data. Yun nga, if nagkaroon ng brownout or nagkaroon ng natural disaster, how will you have access to personal data? Okay? And then you test and assess and evaluate the security measures. Okay? Because every now and then, let's say, you say, oh, protected naman yung ano namin, yung database namin. Meron kaming malware, anti-malware. But how effective is that? Remember, masyado na ring innovative ang mga hackers ngayon. Anybody can hack into your system. Kaya nga, there are systems or there are apps that needs to be upgraded every now and then so that it is secure. That is also what you do with your systems. That is also what you do with your database. You have to update it every now and then so that all the other new threats will be covered and you will be protected. Okay? You can also take into consideration encrypting personal data. If, let's say, you exchange data from one entity to another, you can encrypt it. May mga encryption software naman you can use. So that even if you send an email to another entity containing personal information, they cannot easily have access to it kung wala sila nung encryption key. Kasi when you encrypt it, the other party would have a decryption key for them to be able to see the contents of, let's say, an email. So you can also consider those things. Okay? So far, we're good? Okay. Quiz time again. What can you say about this? May I ask participants to turn on their cameras again? What can you say about this picture? Sino po ang pwedeng mag-participate? Miss Mia, you want to volunteer anyone?
Okay po, attorney. Wait lang po
Para hindi nyo ako masisi pag ako yung nagtawag. Si Miss Mia sisihin nyo.
Sir Mark, okay po sa inyo, sir?
Hi, Miss Mia.
Okay
Salamat
po.
sa pag-volunteer sa akin.
Yes. What can you say about the picture, Sir Mark?
High risk because dun sa flood, madaling masira at masira yung data na kailangan. Sana may backup sila.
Yes. Backup. If let's say yung naka-blue is yung accounting, tapos yung nakaputi is nag-walk-in lang siya, nag-inquire siya about your services, do you think it's secure?
Mas madaling makita lang bigla. Dapat dapat yung design ng office protected yung data.
Yes, so that's part of physical security measure. Thank you, Sir Mark. Thank you, Miss Mia. So we proceed. Baka naman sobrang deep-seated nga ng ninyo, concern for protecting personal information. Ayan, pinaupuan na lang yung mga documents sa bouncer. Huwag naman ganyan, okay? So you enforce reasonable and adequate security measures. Huwag yung pauupuan nyo lang sa iba para bantayan, okay? Because if you do not do that, the reality is really magkakaroon ng data breach. You see, if you issue laptops to your employees, lalo na ngayon work from home, so as I was saying, you dispose of your documents properly. You make sure that you shred it kung hindi na talaga kailangan, because other people might get it and use it. Okay? Now, the 5 pillars of compliance will guide you in terms of complying with the Data Privacy Act. Because I also saw one question that says, is there a particular way to be able to comply with the Data Privacy Act when it comes to NGOs? Well, actually, the Data Privacy Act is generic to all companies naman po. And you can take note of the 5 pillars of compliance. Okay, so aside from the things that I've discussed, in summary, ito po siya. So first, you appoint a data protection officer because your data protection officer will be the liaison between NPC and your company. And then also the data protection officer will be the one who will nudge your management as to what proper security measures or as to what proper rules and regulations may be put in force to be able to comply with the DPA. So as I said, the first pillar is appointing a data protection officer. Okay? Second is conducting a privacy impact assessment. Yun nga, you identify the processes of each of the process owners or each of the units in your organization. Identify the processes and then the risks that are involved in such processes, and then put in place security measures. Okay? And then, third, you also create a privacy management program. So dito papasok yung mga rules and regulations in your organization, taking into consideration the Data Privacy Act and those that you need to comply with sa Data Privacy Act. Okay? Also, you implement the security measures that I've mentioned, yung physical, organizational, and technical security measures. Okay? And then fifth, be ready in case of a data breach. Okay? How can you get ready? So dapat, it's already included in your privacy management program. Okay? Because the privacy management program will, that is where you will identify the people who can first be there to respond to a data breach. Example, if a personal information of your employee was unlawfully disclosed, kanino nyo dapat i-elevate yon? So first, of course, you have your data protection officer and yung higher management. Okay? And then you also put into place a regulation as to how you're going to manage in case there is a data breach. So aside from creating a data breach group or a data breach task force, you also identify how you're going to address such data breach. Okay? And when you're going to address such data breach. Okay? So you put that into your privacy management program. Okay? Now, you cannot, not because you have those policies in place already, you have those security measures means na okay na kayo. Okay? You have to anticipate. That's why you regularly evaluate it pa rin. Okay? So there. So for those organizations na wala pa pong data protection officers, you need to appoint one. Okay? So it is mandatory. So you should designate an individual who will function as a DPO, and the DPO will be accountable for ensuring compliance with the DPA. Okay? Now, for the general qualifications of a DPO, so they should have specialized knowledge or demonstrate reliability necessary for the performance. A DPO should ideally be knowledgeable of the processes of the organization. Dapat may alam siya sa buong operations ng organization. Okay? So that they could put in force policies and practices that the company can adapt. Okay? Now, you should also have sufficient understanding of the processing operations and have knowledge of the sector. Like kayo po, mga foundations, non-government organizations, someone knowledgeable of that sector. Because as a liaison, you will be the one who will be asked by NPC. So aside from that, it's the DPO who will advise regarding the complaints and then ensure proper data breach and security incident management. So kayo po, together with the management, will be the one to determine how you will manage any data breach. And then you will also help in cultivating awareness of privacy, maybe with the help of your HR. Okay? And then you will be the advocate for data privacy. And then you will be the one who will serve as contact person of NPC in case we need anyone from your organization. Okay? So you will be the liaison and in cooperating, coordinating, or seeking advice from the NPC. Okay, this one, nakasuspend naman po yung mandatory registration as of the moment. But when we roll this out again, so there is mandatory registration when the PIC processes personal data or is operating in the country under any of the following conditions. So if you have 250 employees, or if you are processing sensitive personal information of at least 1,000 individuals, or if the processing of information that you do is likely to pose a risk to the rights and freedoms of data subject, and the same is not occasional. So processing of personal data that is likely to pose a risk to rights and freedoms of the data subject. So this includes government entities, banks and non-bank financing institutions, okay, BPOs, mga educational institutions, and hospitals. Those are the likes of those requiring to register. Mga cooperatives, because they are non-bank financing institutions. So you have to do that. Okay. So for the privacy impact assessment, I've already discussed this. So that's one way for you to demonstrate compliance. Okay. Now, for personal breach. Personal breach means a breach of security leading to the accidental or unlawful destruction, loss, alteration, unauthorized disclosure, or access to personal data. Okay? So it may pertain to availability breach when you cannot retrieve the personal data anymore, such as when it was destroyed by natural disaster, or it may be an integrity breach, such as when other people got access to your files and changed the details there. So, nako-compromise yung integrity ng personal information. Or it may be confidentiality breach when there is unauthorized disclosure or access. Okay? So, because of that, there is a need for you to have a security incident management policy. So, ito yung sinasabi ko, you create a group or a task force that will be your data breach response team. Sa kanila i-elevate at the onset of a data breach, who will be the people that you will identify that a process owner can go to elevate the problem. Okay? That is also where you put in your security measures. And then you also put in there in your policy how to respond to the data breach. Okay? That could include informing the data subject themselves. Ma'am, sir, na-access po kasi yung 201 file nyo, but we have elevated it to the management already and they are trying to look into who the perpetrator was and we have tried to retrieve your information already. Okay? So that is how you do it. Okay, and then also mitigating the risk that you have identified in your privacy impact assessment. Okay, so that is all part of security incident management policy that you have to put in place. Okay, so if there are also data breach, you have to inform the National Privacy Commission whenever it involves sensitive personal information that may enable identity fraud, and if it is acquired by an unauthorized person and it may give rise to a real risk of serious harm. So if it's possible na magkaroon ng identity theft when the personal information was compromised, you need to inform NPC. Okay, for this one, you can just take a picture of this. This will serve as your guide. Ito lang po yung summary ng lahat ng diniscuss ko. Okay. So you can take a picture of that and that will help you in creating your policies. Okay. Otherwise, if you do not create your policies for your organization, you may be at risk of data breach, kagaya na nangyari sa Comelec. Okay, so the information of voters were accessed and unnecessarily disclosed. So nagkaroon na rin ng Cebuana Louvier, and then Jollibee suspended their online delivery because of concerns over this. Ganun din before with Cebu Pacific and Wendy's. So you don't want that to happen because there will be there's a risk of you having your reputation at risk. You naman other cooperatives knowing na nagkaroon ng privacy or data breach sa company, then nobody would come to your organization already. Because if you don't do that also, your organization may face penalties, such as for imprisonment or fine for unauthorized processing, access due to negligence or improper disposal, or for unauthorized purposes. Intentional breach, concealing breach, malicious disclosure, unauthorized disclosure, or a combination of any of those acts. Yan po yung mga punishable acts natin. Okay? Okay. So reminders also, stop checking in because this pertains to your locational information. Okay? Personal information pa rin yan when you check in. Checking in at Starbucks. So that's locational information. Then people will be able to know that. Halimbawa, check-in sa particular resort, nalaman ng kapitbahay ninyo, ayun, napasok na yung bahay ninyo. Okay? So those are things that you have to consider also. Stop taking those Facebook quizzes because they harvest your personal data. And when they do that, when they harvest your personal data, they can give it to other people. Yan, yung Face app before. Okay? Yun. So, that's all. Thank you so much. I will not be presenting that video already. So, for any questions po, please feel free to raise them. I actually, Miss Mia sent me a couple of the questions that the participants have. Most of it naman po na-address ko naman po na, right? So, for an organization that has 14 staff, what would be the right position and number of officers to be designated as point of contact? So, you can only have one DPO kung 14 lang naman po. Okay? Templates available for setting up the organization. I was able to flash on the screen the guide. And then for the registration of the DPOs, you can also visit our website. Okay? So that's privacy.gov.ph. So you can check our website also for the forms and for other guides. Okay? Is there a different approach in complying with the DPA as an NGO? Are there any steps that aren't necessarily applicable to us? So yun nga po, it would depend on the information that you process. If you're not processing personal information, then there is no need to register. But if, let's say, you are a cooperative or your members or your clients are cooperatives, you might want to nudge them into registering with us kasi sila po covered po sila. Okay? And as I've said, compliance with the DPA is generic. So even if, let's say, you are not processing personal information of borrowers per se directly, but you are processing personal information of your employees, you are, although you're not required to register with the NPC, you are still mandated to comply with the DPA. Okay? Hindi pa rin po pwedeng ibibigay nyo yung information ng mga employees nyo without proper basis. Yan po. For this data privacy, does a foundation should create a particular policy? Yun nga po, every organization must create their own data privacy policy. Because that would also help you to protect yourself and your organization. Okay?
Attorney, yes.
Yes, Sir
Okay.
Levin.
Yes, ma'am. Of course, aside from that question, we have another question po from Mr. Jeffrey K. Lansangan.
Okay.
Actually, yung question niya po for you is about, can you recommend a consultant who can help us comply with the DPA?
Opo. We actually do not recommend anyone. But if ever that you will be needing guidance, your sector would belong to non-bank financing institution also because you grant loans. So if ever that you will be needing assistance, you can always email me naman po. My email is anna.puzon@privacy.gov.ph. So you are under my sector naman po. So I can provide guidance. Just email me. Nagre-reply naman po ako.
Yes. Thank you for that, attorney. Then we have another one from Ms. Arlene Sarmiento from FSSI. With the contract tracing measure being implemented these days, an example, giving out information such as address, contract number, email address when filing out forms, before entry to banks, drugstore, restaurants, hospital, and other establishment, is data privacy not compromised?
As I've discussed a while ago, it is within the legitimate interest and it is within public purpose for the benefit of the public that we are collecting this, lalo na po in times of the pandemic. It's not actually compromised because there is a balancing of interest naman. If it's for the good of the general public, you really need to collect that for contact tracing efforts. Okay? So, kaya nga po nandito din po ang National Privacy Commission so that we also ensure that those who collect such information does not go beyond what is necessary to be collected. Yun po.
Hello, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And then,
dito po sa akin listahan, meron na lang po akong isa. Question from our colleague. What is the meaning of this? While you can have data protection without data privacy, you cannot have data privacy without data protection, ma'am?
okay. Yes. While you can have data protection without data privacy, you cannot have data privacy without data protection. It just means mas general na term po kasi ang data privacy than data protection. So you can have data protection, but that does not guarantee data privacy. Like example, for government employees like me, my data is protected. There is data protection in such a way that there are certain guidelines that my information will not be used beyond certain limitations. Okay? But I have no privacy as a government employee kasi let's say my personal data sheet is publicly available. Okay? So there is no data privacy for me, but there is data protection in such a way that my personal data sheet may be accessed only in certain instances and may guidelines po doon. So the data privacy in itself is a general term, but data protection is a specific term. So pwede din po, yun nga po, when it comes to public authority or public officials exercising their mandate, they can get information that may be covered by data privacy. But because they have the mandate to get such information, nawawala po yung privacy, ang pumapasok po, data protection. So you regulate what is being disclosed. Yun po yung meaning nun.
Thank you, Attorney. Actually, right now, we're receiving a lot of questions dahil napakaganda ng topic natin. It is really relevant ngayon, especially na our working at home. So we have another question here po. The question is regarding mandatory registration. One of the 4 conditions for this is processing is not occasional. Even small organizations, companies would process info regularly. Example, for personnel, HR, for their services, partners, and beneficiaries. What is meant by processing is not occasional.
Okay, balikan natin yung
Attorney.
slide niya. Let me just flash this para malinaw.
Question from Sir Dodo.
Okay. So, mandatory registration should be under any of the following conditions. Okay? So, 1, 2, 3, and when the processing is not occasional. So, kapag regular pong ginagawa, and it falls under 1, 2, 3. Yun po yung meaning nun. Any questions?
Yes,
po?
Attorney, thank you for that. We receive another question po dito for a while po. Should there guidelines to properly collect data when you enter a restaurant? Some establishment must use logbook when you enter their establishment, wherein I can see info details of other people. So I think related ito dun sa parang yung privacy, no? Yung nakikita yung data like na sa computer kanina.
Yes. As I've said, although yes, you can see it, we've called the attention already of the general public regarding that, na kung pwede sana yung hindi makikita. But then, if it is being collected and you can see it, it's legitimate naman kasi nga po, it's for contact tracing efforts. Okay? It's just that maybe you can call on the attention also of those entities na kung pwede yung hindi nakikita. Or like individual forms na lang para hindi nakakakitaan. That would be better. Okay.
Correct. Thank you for that, Attorney. We have another one from Mr. Jeff Lasangan. Are there templates available for DP policies which we can use as guide?
Yun na po yung finlash ka a while ago sa screen. So that's a guide already. I gave also Miss Mia a copy of my presentation. You can ask for a copy of my presentation also. Yun, for your personal consumption. So that can serve as a guide also. And then we have also, you can visit our website. So privacy.gov.ph. There's a page there on how to comply.
Thank you for that, Attorney. Actually, last question na po yun. So far, if meron pong mga additional questions yung ating mga participants, saan po sila pwedeng mag-email sa inyo yung for that question po?
Yes. Again, you may email me at anna.puzon@privacy.gov.ph. kung may mga questions pa po. And then you can also email our office at info@privacy.gov.ph. Yan po.
Thank you, Ma'am Attorney Anna, for that wonderful informative session for this afternoon. I think we'll give the floor to our Ms. Doreen.
Okay, thank you very much, Levin, for facilitating the Q&A. Again, if you have questions, you may direct your questions by
Are there any more
email
questions? Yeah.
or you can email us and then we'll consolidate and send Attorney Anna, and then we'll email you back. Also, if you can please participate in our fill out our evaluation form, which the link will be sent through the chat box. And then after you have filled out the information, the evaluation form, we will send you the link to Attorney Anna's materials. So at this point, we'd like to ask our Executive Director, Dodo, to give the closing remarks. And after the closing remarks, if you can just stay a little bit for some photos after the closing remarks. Okay, let's hear it from Dodo.
Well, maraming salamat, Attorney Anna Puzon, for sharing the extensive information nga about the Data Privacy Act. So maraming salamat, Attorney Anna. Tapos, well, three quick points lang siguro not to summarize, but that I want to share after listening to the discussion. Una striking sa akin na Attorney Anna started by saying that data privacy is part of the respect for human rights, which is enshrined in our 1987 Constitution. So it's one of our rights in data privacy, and it's protected under the Constitution. Kahapon we celebrated the 35th anniversary of EDSA, and as you all know, the 1997 Constitution is a result of that. And the protection of the rights to free speech, to assemble, to protest, are all results of the People Power Revolution that we celebrated or commemorated yesterday. No? So that's the first point. Yung second point, so human rights, right to privacy, pero we need to balance it with a public good. Diba? Yun yung sinabi rin ni Attorney Anna. It has to be balanced with the public good. So may right to privacy, but we also need to ensure free flow of information to promote information development and growth. No? In fact, kuwari may mga, alam niyo naman yun, diba? May bank secrecy law, tapos meron din namang anti-money laundering act. So may mga balancing, merong freedom of information, well, hindi pa batas ngayon, pero executive order. And then even the Constitution, for example, requires yung statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth, no, for all public officials, from the president to other public officials. So that's also balancing public good with the right to privacy. So that's the second point. So yung third point, so parang pwede mo sabihin na common sense lang naman ito, di ba? Respect the privacy rights of people and balance it with common good, with legitimate interest. Pero meron din mga particular requirements yung batas that we need to be more familiar with and that we need to comply. So yun yung session natin ngayon, how to become familiar with the Data Privacy Act, with the requirements for the compliance, including yung Data Privacy Officer, the Data Privacy Policy. Sa akin, ang mahalaga lang din naman na tingin ko nandun naman sa batas and nandun naman sa intention ng Privacy Commission is yung appropriateness din, diba? Iba yung mga rules for the big organizations, iba yung rules for the smaller organizations. So may appropriateness din, may proportionality. But we need to be familiar with the law and then decide how we will appropriately comply with that based on our own particular situation in each of our organizations. So yun lang. Tapos maraming salamat ulit, Atty. Anna, and maraming salamat din sa lahat ng participants sa pakikinig at sa partisipasyon ninyo ngayong umaga. Salamat
Thank
po.
you for having me also, sir.
Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Happy weekend. Kung may kung may questions po, you can just email to Attorney Anna or to us at FSSI, and then we'll forward it to Attorney Anna. Maraming salamat po. Happy weekend. Ingat po kayo.
Thank you. Thank you po. Bye.